The door flew open before Ethan could reach it. 3 of them. The alley behind the anchor smelled like rain and rust. He had nowhere to go. The wall was already at his back. His phone was cracked on the pavement 6 feet away. And then he saw the man. Leather jacket. Iron cross patch on the chest. Eyes like he'd seen worse than this and survived every bit of it. Ethan didn't think. He just leaned forward, close enough that only that man could hear, and whispered 4 words. 4 words. What happened next would fill the streets of Portland with the sound of 100 engines and break every story anyone thought they knew. Portland in late October wore its rain like a second skin. The city didn't apologize for the cold. It simply offered it grey and constant, as though the sky had made its peace with melancholy long ago. On Southeast Hawthorne Boulevard, the neon signs of coffee shops and vintage stores reflected off puddles in fractured electric colors, and the people who moved beneath them carried umbrellas as a formality rather than a defense. Ethan Calloway pulled his jacket tighter as he stepped off the 14 bus and turned toward the familiar curve of the street. He was 26 years old, with the kind of face people described as kind before they described it as anything else. Brown hair that fell slightly over his forehead, no matter how many times he pushed it back. Green eyes that had learned to scan rooms quickly, a habit built over years he didn't like to talk about. He worked as a graphic designer for a mid-size marketing agency in the Pearl District, spending his days translating other people's ideas into visual language, and his evenings in the quiet rhythms of a life he had carefully, deliberately constructed. He had been with Daniel for 8 months, Daniel, who taught high school history and made terrible puns about the Battle of Antietam and always had a paperback shoved in his back pocket. They had met at a book fair in the South Park blocks, argued pleasantly about whether Cormac McCarthy was a genius or a punishment, and somehow ended up sharing a plate of arepas from a food cart an hour later. Ethan had not expected to find something that easy. He had spent most of his adult life expecting the opposite. He was not thinking about any of this as he walked. He was thinking about the pitch he had to finish by Thursday, about whether he'd left the stove on, about the message from his mother that he hadn't yet answered. These were the textures of a normal Tuesday, and he moved through them without ceremony. The anchor was 3 blocks off Hawthorne, a bar tucked between a laundromat and a closed record shop. He wasn't going there. He was passing it. He'd agreed to meet a friend, Owen, at a Thai place 2 streets over, and the route happened to take him past the bar's entrance. He noticed the motorcycles because you couldn't not notice them. 12 or 15 of them lined up along the curb with the easy arrogance of machines that didn't doubt their place in the world. Chrome and black leather, some of them custom, all of them substantial. A few men stood near the entrance, smoking, talking in voices too low to hear clearly. Ethan registered them and kept walking. He was 2 storefronts past the anchor when he heard the first voice. "Hey." Not a question, not a greeting, an instruction. He didn't stop. His heartbeat shifted, the way it always did. A small, automatic recalibration his body performed without asking permission. He had learned to keep moving in these moments, to not react, to keep his face neutral and his pace steady. "Hey, I'm talking to you." He was almost to the corner. The Thai place was half a block to the left. Owen was probably already there, sitting at a table by the window, reading something on his phone. Ethan focused on that image. 3 of them stepped out from a gap between buildings he hadn't noticed. They hadn't come from the bar. They'd been waiting in the narrow passage between the laundromat and the shuttered record shop, in the dark space where the streetlight didn't reach. He hadn't seen them until they were already between him and the corner. They were young, maybe 19 or 20, wearing team jackets from a school he didn't recognize. One of them had a phone out, screen recording. Ethan's pulse was louder now, a steady pressure behind his ears. "Where are you going?" The one in the middle spoke with a smile that had nothing warm in it. He'd seen Ethan getting off the bus. Maybe he'd seen Ethan and Daniel before, on this same street, on some other evening. It didn't matter why. It never really mattered why. Ethan glanced back. The sidewalk behind him was empty. The men from the bar had gone inside. His phone was in his jacket pocket. He could try to dial, but his hands weren't moving the way he wanted them to. The middle kid stepped forward, and the space between them shrank to 4 feet, then 3. His back found the wall of the laundromat. The one with the phone said something under his breath to the others, and they laughed. A loose, anticipatory sound. The middle kid reached out and shoved, flat-handed to the chest. Not hard enough to hurt, hard enough to establish something. Ethan's phone tumbled from his jacket onto the wet pavement. The screen cracked. 6 feet away. He looked to the left. He looked to the right. And then, without planning it, without knowing what he was doing, he looked past them, past all 3 of them, at the entrance of the Anchor, where one man had come back outside to finish a cigarette. The man was tall. 40, maybe more. A leather jacket with a chapter patch on the back that Ethan couldn't read from this distance. Salt and pepper beard. Arms that suggested a lifetime of physical work. He was looking at his phone, not at the street. Ethan did not think about what it meant that this man wore that jacket. He did not think about what he'd been told about men like this, or what stories he'd absorbed over the years about who they were and what they did. He thought about the wall behind him and the 3 kids in front of him and the cracked phone on the wet pavement. He took 2 steps to the right, fast, slipping past the shoulder of the kid on the end before any of them fully registered it. It bought him 8 feet, maybe 10, enough to cross the sidewalk. He walked directly toward the man with the cigarette, close enough that he had to look up slightly. The man raised his eyes from his phone. They were dark, steady, not unkind, just waiting. Ethan leaned in, because the 3 of them were right behind him now. Because he had nothing else, because sometimes the only move left is the one you'd never have chosen. He whispered 4 words. They won't stop, please. Cole Merritt had been riding for 23 years. He had started in Bakersfield, California, when he was 21, the year after his father died, and he needed something to put his hands on, something loud enough to quiet the interior noise. He'd ridden through every state west of the Mississippi at least once. He'd been to Sturgis 4 times. He'd buried 2 Chapter brothers in the last decade. One from a highway accident outside Flagstaff, one from something slower and harder to name. He did not romanticize any of it. He was a man who fixed industrial HVAC units for a living, drove his daughter to swim practice on Saturdays, and happened to belong to a club that most people formed strong opinions about without having met anyone in it. He'd been in Portland for a regional chapter gathering, a Saturday ride that had extended into Tuesday because the weather had turned gorgeous over the weekend, and nobody had been in a hurry to leave. They'd taken over a corner of the Anchor, which the owner, a former military man named Douglas, had always been fine with. Douglas didn't ask about patches. He asked if you wanted another round. Cole had come outside for the last cigarette he was planning to quit starting tomorrow, and he'd been looking at a message from his daughter, a photo of a school project on Pacific Northwest ecosystems, when the kid appeared in front of him. Young, slim, brown hair, wet from the rain. Eyes that were working hard to stay calm and failing slightly. Cole took him in a single practiced look. Not threatening, not drunk, not high. Scared. Behind him, 3 guys, late teens or early 20s, moving with the loose-legged certainty of people who hadn't yet learned what consequences felt like from the inside. The kid leaned in. Cole heard 4 words. He didn't say anything for a moment. He looked at the 3 behind the kid. He looked at the kid. He took a long, final drag of his cigarette and dropped it. "Stand next to me," he said. not loud, matter of fact. Ethan moved to his left side. Cole turned his body 45 degrees, putting himself between Ethan and the three who were now slowing, recalculating. "You boys lost?" Cole asked. The middle one, the one who'd done the talking, looked at the jacket, then at Cole's face, then at his arms. A new calculation was happening behind his eyes. His friends had gone very still. "We were just talking to him," the kid said. "Didn't look like talking." Cole crossed his arms. The iron cross patch on his chest was directly in their line of sight. He didn't do it for effect. It was just where his arms ended up when he crossed them. "Walk away!" The middle kid held eye contact for 2 seconds longer than was comfortable. Then he looked at the sidewalk, and the three of them turned and moved down the block, unhurried in the way of people pretending they had somewhere better to be. The phone went back in a pocket. The recording, presumably, stopped. Cole watched them until they rounded the corner. Then he turned to Ethan. "You all right?" Ethan was gripping the strap of his bag with both hands. He nodded once, then shook his head, then nodded again. "Yeah, I think. Yes." He exhaled. "Thank you." "I don't, thank you." "Your phone." Cole pointed at the cracked device still on the wet pavement. Ethan walked over and picked it up. The screen was fractured but still lit. "I should call my friend," Ethan said. He was looking at Cole with an expression that Cole recognized, the complicated arithmetic of someone recalibrating a lot of assumptions at once. "He's waiting for me." "Good idea. Call him." Cole reached back for the door handle. "You want to come inside while you do?" Ethan looked at the door. He looked at the motorcycles. He looked at Cole. "Sure," he said. "Okay." The inside of the Anchor was warm and smelled like beer and wood smoke from the pellet stove in the corner. 11 members of the Portland chapter were scattered between 2 tables in the bar, playing cards, watching a game on the mounted screen, arguing about something Cole had tuned out an hour ago. The place was loud in the specific, comfortable way of men who'd known each other long enough to not need to explain themselves. The noise dropped by half when Ethan came in, not hostile, just noticing. Cole moved through it like it wasn't happening. "Douglas," he said, "can we get a water and whatever he wants?" Douglas, a wide-shouldered man in his 50s with a grey crew cut, looked at Ethan, then at Cole, then back to the bar. "Coming up." Ethan sat on the stool Cole indicated. He texted Owen, "Had a thing, I'm okay. Be there in 20. He looked around the room with the careful peripheral attention of someone trying not to stare. The men at the tables had resumed their conversations. One of them, a heavy-set man with a red beard named Warren, was looking at Ethan with a kind of benign curiosity, the way you might look at a cat that had wandered into your kitchen. "You live around here?" Cole asked. "Couple miles east. I was just cutting through." Ethan wrapped both hands around the glass of water Douglas set in front of him. "I've walked that block 100 times. Most nights it's fine," Cole said. "Yeah." Ethan set the glass down. "I know." Cole signaled for a beer. The game on the screen was the Blazers, down 6 in the third quarter. Warren made a noise of disgust, and someone at the far table told him to relax. The ordinary noise of the bar resumed, and Ethan was inside it, sitting at the counter of the Anchor, with 11 members of a motorcycle club on a Tuesday night in October. And the world was not the shape he'd expected it to be. He finished his water. He picked up his cracked phone. He looked at Cole. "I had a lot of ideas about—" He stopped, started again. "I appreciate it, that's all." Cole picked up his beer. "You got somewhere to be. Go." Ethan stood. He put on his jacket. He was halfway to the door when Warren called from his table, not unkindly. "Hey, you good?" Ethan turned. "Yeah," he said. "I'm good." Warren nodded once and went back to the game. Owen Lee was 28, third-generation Korean-American, and the kind of friend who showed up when things went sideways without needing to be asked. He'd been Ethan's closest friend since their first year at Portland State, held together by a shared love of mid-century design and a mutual inability to cook anything more complex than eggs. When Ethan walked into the Thai restaurant, soaking wet, with a cracked phone and an expression Owen had never seen before, Owen set down his menu and said, "Tell me," Ethan told him. Owen was quiet for a long time after. He ate 2 spring rolls. He said, "What was the guy's name?" "Cole." Ethan pushed noodles around his plate. "I didn't ask his last name. And he just walked out and told them to leave." "He told them to walk away." "They did." Owen looked at the restaurant window, where the rain had picked up again and was running in thin rivers down the glass. "Huh?" he said. "Yeah. I mean, that's—" Owen searched for the word. "That's not what I would have expected." "I know." Ethan had been thinking about this for the last 20 minutes, turning it over. The equation kept refusing to resolve. "I've spent years, and I know that's not everyone, but—" "You had reasons," Owen said. "I had reasons." Ethan picked up his water glass. He had reasons too, probably, about me, and he didn't use any of them. Owen was quiet again. Then, "Are you going to see him again? I don't even know his last name. The bar's 3 blocks away." Ethan looked at him. "I'm just saying," Owen said, and went back to his spring roll. What Ethan didn't tell Owen, because he hadn't fully processed it himself, was how the men inside the anchor had felt. Not scary. That was the part he couldn't quite square. Loud, yes. Physically imposing, certainly. But the way they'd moved around him, made space without comment, returned to their conversations. It had the feeling of a place that had its own code, and that the code, in some form he didn't fully understand, included him. He thought about Warren. "You good?" 2 words. The same 2 words his father used to say when Ethan came home from a difficult day in high school, before his father knew anything about those days, before Ethan had told him. His father had meant it then. He thought Warren had meant it too. He didn't know what to do with that, so he paid his half of the bill and walked home in the rain. Over the next 4 days, ordinary life continued. He finished the pitch. It went well. He had dinner with Daniel, who noticed that something was on Ethan's mind and didn't press, which was one of the things Ethan valued about him. He answered his mother's message. He walked to the coffee shop on Burnside, sat by the window with his sketchbook, and drew nothing useful. On Saturday, he told Daniel about it. Daniel was quiet through the whole story, the way he was quiet when he was really listening. No expressions of surprise, no interruptions, just attention. When Ethan finished, Daniel said, "What do you think about going back?" Owen said the same thing. "Owen's smart." Daniel pulled at a loose thread on his sleeve. "What would you say?" "Thank you again, I guess." Ethan looked at the table. "I don't know. It feels strange, like I'd be bothering him." "You walked in there alone because you were scared and he helped you. You're worried about bothering him." Ethan didn't answer because the answer was obvious when Daniel said it that way. Sunday afternoon. Rain had paused. The motorcycles were there, not all of them, maybe 6. Ethan pushed the door open and went in. Douglas looked up from behind the bar. Something passed across his face. Not surprise, more like the expression of a man who'd seen enough things to not be surprised by most of them. "The kid," he said. "I'm looking for the man who was outside Tuesday. Cole." Douglas tilted his head toward the back tables. Cole was there with 2 others, a hand of cards on the table in front of them. He saw Ethan at roughly the same moment Ethan saw him. He didn't smile or wave. He folded his cards face down and stood, which was enough. Ethan walked over. "You came back," Cole said. "I wanted to say it properly." Ethan extended his hand. "Ethan Calloway. Thank you. Properly." Cole took it. His hand was large and dry, and the handshake was brief but solid. "Cole Merritt." He pulled out a chair. "Sit down." The two men at the table, one named Ray, lean and quiet with a grey ponytail, one named Marcus, younger, maybe 30, who had a Portland Timbers sticker on the back of his phone, nodded at Ethan with the same uncomplicated acknowledgement Warren had shown on Tuesday. Marcus dealt himself a new hand and didn't look up again. Ray said, "You want something from the bar?" "I'm okay," Ethan said. He sat. Cole sat. For a moment neither of them spoke, and it wasn't uncomfortable, which surprised Ethan. "How's the phone?" Cole asked. "Still cracked. Works, though." Ethan paused. "I've been thinking about what to say. I had a whole thing planned." "You don't have to say anything." "I know." Ethan looked at the table. "But I wanted to." He looked up. "I grew up being told that men in clubs like yours were—" He stopped. "That's not coming out right." "Try it the other way," Cole said. "I was wrong," Ethan said, "about a lot. Maybe not about everything, but Tuesday I was wrong, and I'd rather say that than not say it." Cole was quiet for a moment. He looked at his cards, face down on the table. He said, "I spent most of my 20s in a chapter that would have been on the other side of that street. Different chapter, different time, different men." He turned one of the cards over, a 7 of clubs, and then turned it back. "I'm not the same as I was." "Neither am I," Ethan said. Marcus, without looking up from his hand, said, "This is getting very after-school special." Ray told him to shut up. Marcus grinned. Cole's mouth moved at the corner in something that wasn't quite a smile but was adjacent to one. Ethan felt something shift slightly in his chest, the loosening of a knot he hadn't known was there. He stayed for an hour. He didn't say much. Neither did Cole. They talked about the Blazers, bad season incoming, general consensus. About the rain, worse than usual for October, Cole had heard. About a highway near Multnomah Falls that had been under construction since the spring. Normal things. The kind of things that fill the space between people who are deciding whether to trust each other. When he left, Cole walked him to the door. "You should get that screen fixed," Cole said. "I know." Ethan paused on the threshold, the cold air coming in from the street. "I'm going to be walking past here more often, probably." Cole looked at him. Probably. What Ethan didn't know, what he had no way of knowing as he walked down Southeast Hawthorne with his cracked phone in his pocket, was that the 3 kids from Tuesday had not in fact let it go. The message came through Owen on a Thursday. One of Owen's college friends, a woman named Claire, who worked in social media consulting, had been shown a video by a client's intern, 12 seconds of footage, shaky and unclear, taken on a phone at roughly chest height. In it, a young man with brown hair was visible for a moment against a storefront before the camera turned. The video had been circulating in a closed online group with a caption that included Ethan's first name and the neighborhood. Owen called Ethan at 7:14 in the morning. Ethan sat on the edge of his bed and listened. His stomach went cold. "It's not your face, clearly," Owen said, "but the jacket, and they used your name." "Where's it circulating?" Claire said a few hundred people in the group. "It hasn't gone broader, yet." Ethan put the phone face down on the bed. He picked it up again. He called Daniel, who drove over in 20 minutes, still in his teacher's clothes, and sat at the kitchen table while Ethan paced. "We can report it," Daniel said. "I did that before, when I was 22. The detective told me to stay out of certain neighborhoods." Daniel's jaw tightened. He didn't say what he was thinking. He said, "What do you want to do?" Ethan didn't have an answer. He went to work. He came home. He double-locked the door, which felt both necessary and absurd. Friday morning, Owen texted to say the group had grown to over 1,000 members, and the caption had been updated with the street name. Saturday arrived grey and still. Ethan had not slept well. He sat at his kitchen table with coffee he wasn't drinking and his cracked phone and no clear path forward, and then, without making a decision exactly, he found himself putting on his jacket. He walked to the anchor. Cole was outside, talking to Warren and a woman Ethan hadn't seen before. Late 30s, short dark hair, a jacket that matched Warren's in patch placement. She was introduced as Nina, Warren's wife, who ran logistics for the chapter's annual charity ride. Cole took one look at Ethan's face. "Come inside," he said. Ethan told them. All of it. The video, the group, the number of people. He kept his voice steady by concentrating on a fixed point on the wall behind Cole's head. When he finished, Cole was quiet for a moment. Warren had gone very still. Nina said calmly, "Do you still have the names? The 3 kids from Tuesday?" "No." "I never knew their names." "We do," Cole said. Ethan looked at him. "Warren recognized one of them Tuesday night. He's from the neighborhood. We know who he is." The information landed strangely, both a relief and a weight. Ethan sat with it. "I'm not asking anyone to—" He stopped. "I just needed to tell someone who knew about Tuesday, that's all. I'm not asking for anything." Cole looked at Warren. Warren looked at Nina. Some kind of communication passed between them that Ethan wasn't fully privy to. "Let me make some calls," Cole said. What happened in the next 18 hours, Ethan only understood partially and after the fact. He knew that Cole made phone calls. He knew that those calls were made to chapter presidents in Eugene, Salem, Medford, Astoria, and Seattle. He knew that something moved through those networks with the quiet efficiency of people who had built trust over decades, who owed each other the kind of debts that weren't financial. Sunday morning. Ethan woke to a message from Cole. "Come to the bar at noon." He arrived at 11:55. Hawthorne was busy. Sunday morning traffic, a farmer's market 2 blocks east drawing its usual crowd. He heard it before he turned the corner, the low, sustained rumble of a large number of engines idling, then going quiet in clusters, the way applause dies in waves. He turned the corner. The street in front of the anchor, and extending 2 blocks in both directions along the curb, was lined with motorcycles, not 15. Not 30. He counted rows and stopped counting at some point because the number stopped being the point. The sidewalk in front of the bar was dense with people in leather jackets, some standing in groups, some leaning against their bikes, some moving purposefully toward a cluster around Cole near the entrance. Ethan stood on the edge of the sidewalk. He was aware of his own heartbeat. Someone touched his shoulder. It was Owen, who had somehow arrived before him, standing to his left with an expression that mixed astonishment with something quieter. "Did you know?" Ethan asked. "Cole called me last night," Owen said. "He asked for your number. I figured you'd want to see it yourself." Cole came through the crowd toward him. He walked the way he always walked, no performance in it. "What is this?" Ethan asked. "Chapters," Cole said. "Portland, Seattle, Medford, Eugene, Astoria, couple others." "Why?" Cole looked at him for a moment. "Because Warren's wife made some calls after you left yesterday. And when Nina makes calls, people listen." A pause. "And because what happened to you on Tuesday isn't something we let stand." "You organized all of this." "Nina organized it. I just answered the phone." Cole looked out at the street. "There are about 100 of us. We're going to ride through the neighborhood. That group the kids were posting in, most of them are local, and local people understand certain things." Ethan didn't speak. He was trying to locate himself in the sequence of events, the wall of the laundromat, the 4 words, the bar, the handshake, and now this. 100 men and women in leather jackets on a Sunday morning in October, because a stranger had whispered for help. "This doesn't fix everything," Cole said. "No. But it's what's available today." Warren appeared at Cole's shoulder. He looked at Ethan with the same direct, uncomplicated regard he'd shown on Tuesday. "You want to ride along?" "I don't have a bike. Nina's got a sidecar." Ethan looked at Owen. Owen shrugged in a way that meant, "This is your call, obviously, but also yes." "Okay," Ethan said. Nina was easy to find. She was the person everyone was orienting toward without quite looking at. She was small and efficient in her movements, jacket hanging open, organizing the order of the ride with the practiced attention of someone who'd done this many times. She saw Ethan coming and pointed at the sidecar without preamble. "Get in. Try not to look nervous." "I'm not nervous," Ethan said. She looked at him. "I'm a little nervous," he said. "Good," she said. "Means you're paying attention." The engines came back on, 100 of them all at once, and the sound was less like noise than like weather, an environmental fact, the kind of thing that moves through your chest before your brain processes it. Ethan sat in the sidecar and felt it in his sternum, and then Warren pulled out from the curb, and they were moving, the whole column of them, down Southeast Hawthorne in the thin, grey October light. People on the sidewalk stopped to watch. A few took out phones. The farmers' market crowd turned to look. A kid on a bicycle pulled over and stared with his mouth open. The ride took 40 minutes. They went through 4 neighborhoods. They went past the laundromat. They went past the corner where 3 kids had stepped out of a dark gap between buildings. Nobody was there. It didn't matter. The video of the ride appeared online before Sunday was over. Not the one the 3 kids had posted. A different one. Several different ones, actually, shot from sidewalks and cafe windows and the upper floors of apartments, capturing a column of motorcycles moving through southeast Portland on a grey October morning with a deliberateness that was impossible to mistake for anything casual. The closed online group had a moderator who by Monday evening had taken it down entirely. Cole texted Ethan, "Group's gone." Ethan texted back, "I know. Thank you." A pause of 20 minutes. Then Cole, "Thank Nina." Ethan laughed for the first time in 4 days. He met Nina for coffee on Tuesday at a place on Division Street that made the kind of pour-over that required a small ceremony to produce. She was, up close and outside the context of the bar and the ride, a precise and attentive person with a dry, almost academic sense of humor and strong opinions about city zoning. She had a master's degree in urban planning from University of Oregon. She had joined the club 8 years ago because Warren asked her to ride with him one weekend, and she had discovered that she liked it more than she'd expected. "People assume things," she said, turning her cup in both hands. "About Warren, about the chapter, about what we are." "I know," Ethan said. "I was one of them. Most people are." She didn't say it as an accusation. The assumptions run both ways. "I've had people in the club who assumed things about—" She gestured vaguely in his direction, meaning his life, his identity, the broader category. "It's not a perfect organization. It's people. People are complicated." "What made you want to help?" "Sunday." Nina looked out the window at the street. A cyclist moved past. A woman walking a large dog, the ordinary motion of a city going about its business. "Cole told me what you said to him. The 4 words." She looked back. "I have a brother who's 24. He's in Sacramento. She stopped, searched for the word. "He's had some Tuesdays of his own." Ethan held the coffee cup. "I'm sorry. He's okay. But I know what it costs. To whisper something like that to a stranger." She looked at him directly. "You trusted Cole when you had every reason not to. That's not nothing. That's the whole thing, actually." He thought about that on the walk home. He thought about the gap between the story you tell yourself about the world and the world as it actually turns out to be. The places where those two things don't match, where something happens that refuses to fit the map you've been using. He had been using a particular map for a long time, not without reason. The map had kept him safe in certain ways, but maps are not the territory. They are useful until they aren't. He called his mother that evening. She answered on the second ring, the way she always did, and said, "I was starting to think you'd been swallowed by the Pacific." "Just busy," he said. She was quiet for a moment in the comfortable way of a woman who knew her son's silences. "You sound different. Good different or bad different?" "Just different." A pause. "Tell me about your week." He told her some of it, not all of it. The parts that would worry her, he left abstract. He told her about Nina. Cole. He told her about sitting in a sidecar while 100 motorcycles moved through the rain-slicked streets of Portland on a Sunday morning. His mother, who had grown up in a small town in Oregon, where men who looked like Cole had represented something specific and frightening, was quiet for a long time. "Well," she said finally, "people are strange." "Yeah," Ethan said, "I think that's the right answer." He went back to the Anchor on a Friday 3 weeks later. Not because anything was wrong, because Cole had mentioned the last time they'd texted that Warren was grilling in the parking lot in defiance of the November weather, and that everyone was welcome. Ethan brought Daniel, who shook Cole's hand, and then spent 20 minutes talking to Marcus about the Timbers' playoff chances, which apparently required no warm-up period at all. At some point in the evening, Ethan found himself standing next to Warren at the grill, holding a beer, watching Daniel gesticulate about a penalty call that had apparently been egregious. The night was cold, and the parking lot was lit by a string of lights Warren had hung between the bar and the fence, and the smell of smoke and meat and autumn was everywhere. "You doing okay?" Warren asked. Ethan looked at him. 2 words, the same question. He thought about the first time Warren had asked it, through the noise of the bar, with Ethan still adjusting to the strangeness of being there at all. He thought about everything that had come after. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I am." Warren nodded and turned a set of burgers with the concentration of a man who considered the task important. The conversation around them was loud and warm and in motion. Later, when Daniel and Ethan were walking home, Daniel put his arm around Ethan's shoulders and said, "That was not what I expected." "I know. Marcus knows a lot about the Timbers. He has a sticker on his phone. I know, but still." Daniel looked at the sky, which had briefly cleared to show a scatter of stars above the city light. "Are you going to keep going back?" Ethan thought about Cole's hands on his shoulders, steering him out of the line of fire. He thought about Nina in a cafe on Division, turning her cup in both hands, talking about her brother in Sacramento. He thought about 100 engines going on at once on a Sunday morning, the sound moving through him like something alive. He thought about a wall and 3 kids and 4 whispered words and everything that had traveled out from that moment in directions he couldn't have predicted. "Yeah," he said. "I think so." The city went on around them, lights and rain and the low hum of a place too large to know itself fully, always containing more than it appeared to. Ethan walked home through it with his hand in Daniel's, his cracked phone in his pocket, and the particular quiet of someone who has found, unexpectedly, that the world is larger than the map of it they'd been carrying. He didn't throw the map away. He just drew new lines on it. That seemed like the honest thing to do,